Hey everybody, it's Motley GM here. Today's video is the first follow-up video to my player character creation video. Now this video is for the players out there and mostly for the new players, but if you're an experienced player, hopefully you'll find a little bit of information here that you might find useful. Now my plan here is to take the different ideas I presented in the first video, which is complete in itself, but to expand on those ideas a little bit, one or two at a time. This way I could focus in a little bit more, maybe give some examples and ideas and or explain the hows and whys. Now in this video, I want to take a look at knowing your character and what that might mean. Now knowing your character, both in statistics and in background, is important for both role play, as in playing and acting and basically where the thespian part of you comes out during your game, and role play, or that's when you roll the dice and the decisions you make because of that. And in this video, I want to expand on these two aspects of character creation and play a little bit. As implied, I will look at this through two different lenses. First, we will discuss looking at character statistics and abilities, and then we'll be looking at background and how these affect personality. I will hopefully do a good job putting it all together at the end while keeping it as simple as possible, because simple is kind of what I like. This should be relatively universal advice and should hopefully fit just about any game you play, although there's always exceptions. Also, I'm not picking on anyone here in this advice at all. I'm simply spreading some advice that I have seen work well in multiple groups that I've played in and or run. And as with everything I put out here, take the bits you like and throw away the rest. Because frankly, you're just doing this to have fun too, I hope. But with no further ado, let's talk about knowing thyself. So we'll start with the rolling dice part of the game. And you want to really start off with understanding what the statistics your character has, what they mean, and how they affect your rolls. What this is really implying is that you should be familiar with the rules of the game. This is where, if you're playing in a rules-light game, you have a bit of an advantage because it's easy to pick up and you can start playing right away. A crunchier game, you might need to take some time to actually read the rules and understand how it all works. So whatever is appropriate for the type of game that you're playing, take some time to understand the rules and the statistics and how they're used. This comes in handy for both you and the other players at the table, because if you know what to roll ahead of time, or at least have an idea, it's not a contentious part of the game or something you have to look up. It's just something you can get right into doing and keep the game moving, which is really important in a game. The more stalls you have in a game, the more a game tends to fizzle out. Now, if we're looking at a class-based system, understanding what that class is capable of and the skills and abilities they get is as important, and this also is connected to understanding the system that you're playing. Now, this also includes magic and or advanced tech or anything like that, just depending on the game that you're playing. When you're looking at a classless system, understand whatever abilities that you're choosing, or feats or boons or whatever they call it in your game, but whatever abilities and skills that you're choosing as your basic level ups for your characters in a classless system, understand what they mean and how they affect the game. Understand the dice that you roll, and don't depend on the GM to do all of that, because it's really a lot for the GM to have to remember all of the time. And when you are able to contribute that really lends the GM more time to think about the story and what's going on in the game. And that also helps keep the game moving and keeps a really good pace for everybody. So I think the basics you want to take from all of this is understanding the system that you're running, and then understanding how the class or abilities that you choose affect that system is super important. And one of the reasons why I usually recommend rules-light games to start off, because when you can start in a rules-light game, there's a lot less of that to manage and understand right off the bat. And if you decide to get into something more complex later, you'll at least have a good foundation to start with. So if you're brand new to this, start with a rules-light game. Multiple videos on my channel talking about games that I recommend are rules-light. By all means, go check some of those out. Some go-to ones I always recommend are Knave 2nd Edition, Cairn 2nd Edition, or Shadow Dark. Those are my three favorite OSR titles that are very rules light. But understanding how the game works and how the things you choose affect that system is very important. So make sure that you remember that, because role play, as in rolling the dice and making decisions, is influenced by the abilities your character has. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't try things that your character's not good at. That's just to say it will definitely give your character more confidence in other areas. And it will do the same for the player as well. Now, let me give you two notorious examples in games. So if you're playing a classic fantasy game, wizards are a notorious example. And I'll also look at Cyberpunk, that Netrunners are also kind of notoriously in the same boat here. Now, what do these classes have in common? They offer a layer of complexity that most other classes don't have. Now, you can insert other classes here as well. Don't get me wrong. These are just the most notorious and I think the easiest ones to pick out and give you that example here. Don't think that they're alone by any means, but they are standout examples, and I feel you can see how this applies to just about everything. But the added layer of complexity that being a wizard and having those spells to manage and how you cast spells depending on the system you're playing, and in a cyberpunk world when we're looking at Netrunners and your abilities to hack into these infrastructures and mainframes, they give you a whole set of rules and skills that you have to manage that other players typically don't. And this is true for just about any game in those respective genres. Now, as someone who chooses to play such a character, if I'm talking to you, take some extra time to be familiar with what your character is both capable and not capable of before gameplay. During gameplay, remember this one really big tip that I don't know if I can stress enough, and I'm certainly not the only one out there saying it. And I do know it's hard to do sometimes, but remember that you have from the end of your turn until the beginning of your next turn to look up spells or hacking abilities or whatever else you may want to do on your next turn. So by the time your turn comes around again, you're already prepared and know what you want to do. I don't think I can stress enough how important that is for not only yourself, but everybody at the table, because that goes back to game pacing and keeping a nice flow of the game. Not to mention that when you're role-playing, that is the thespian part of the game, a competent person who's going to have these things memorized, like spells in the wizard's case and the program protocols it takes to be a Netrunner, they would be competent with those things and remember them. So you want to be able to play that up while you're in combat or not in combat, and understanding how the things work is the main way to do that. Now, instead of just preaching at you here, what are some ways that you can help yourself here? Well, if you're playing at a table, keeping a copy of the book for yourself and having the pages of important information bookmarked so that's easy for you to get at can help you out here. If you have a PDF, you can always have that up on a laptop, a tablet, or your phone for a quick reference, especially if you can have the pages referenced really easily. You may even just copy and paste the information that's just the stuff you need to access quickly and make a separate document out of it or attach it to your character sheet. Some character sheets let you do stuff like that. You might even choose to take that little document you made, print it off, staple it together, and keep it close to you as a physical copy that's easy to access. There are really tons of ways you can have little aids near you, but this just comes back to being familiar with the system. And if you're not ready to take on such a complex character, perhaps consider playing some characters that are less complex first, and then moving on to that when you're a little bit more familiar with the system and the flow of the game. Now, I totally admit I'm picking a little bit on the Wizard and Netrunner classes here, but this really applies to all player characters, be they class or classless, really. Taking a little time to know how your character functions with the game system will help you and your party get more comfortable with the rule set you're using, and as long as everyone is also doing that same thing, become a functional team with a higher chance of survival. And I mean, that kind of depends on the game, but even in really high death rate games, if you can work as a functional team, you often can survive more. Alright guys, let's switch gears here and look at the PC background and what that could mean for your character as well. And as I stated in the first video, background is quite important to who your character is. But how can we apply this? Let's take a look here. The difficult part to this is that two people having the exact same experience might respond in totally opposite ways. So one of the first things you want to decide is how your character responded to their past. What kind of childhood they had may be a good starting point, as people tend to be shaped by that. Now let's take a step back here and go back to that method of asking questions to guide creativity a little bit. Let's assume your character had a happy childhood, but was torn from home at a rather young age due to war and did not know what happened to the rest of their family. How did your character react to this? Did the trauma cause them to lose all hope? Did it make them determined to end the war? Did it cause them to search endlessly for their family? Did they become cold and heartless due to the loss, or did memories of kind parents inspire a different approach to life without? Answering questions like these will help guide your character's personality and disposition. Now, stepping back to that same scenario, what if that same character never was separated from their family? What if they went off to adventure because they loved their family but needed to get out in the world and make their own way? Those two experiences will create different personalities. Some might respond to a hard life growing up by becoming very hard, selfish, and cold, while others, having the same exact experience, might become someone who is happy, generous, and very thankful for all they have. This is where your decisions on how your character responded to their background comes in, and what makes it so important to your character's personality. Now, you can also consider occupation and how that can play a part in the personality as well. Many games do have occupations as part of the background or as a starting point, and this can help guide personality as well. Think about how a physician will have a much different experience in life than a military heavy weapons specialist, and may look at the world a little bit differently because of those different situations and experiences in life. We could have a bit of a talk here about quirks and flaws related to a lot of what I'm saying here, but I think we're going to save that subject for a video all its own, so stay tuned. Let's try to put everything together here a little bit. Taking background into account and combining that with the abilities and statistics a character could have can give you a good idea of how you can mold a personality that fits that character and how they will wield the power they have available to them. Why is that important? Well, it really depends on the level of role play you enjoy. For me, in a long-term campaign, I like to try and really develop a personality of a character while establishing their job on the team. In a shorter-term game or a one-shot, I tend to only have some very basic information about background or personality. If that character survives and continues on to other adventures, I'll build on that little bit that I have and embellish it more as time goes on. And just as a little tip for you GMs out there, this same thing works for NPCs. So keep that in mind. Giving very, very basic backgrounds to people that your players might encounter is a great way to give a starting point in case they become one of those NPCs your players just fall in love with for no reason that you can figure out. And that happens way more than you think. But little extra tip for the GMs there. Anyway, moving back, looking back at combining the backgrounds and the abilities to get yourself a good personality that fits that character. Doing this can also be important to the game because it causes you to be more immersed in your character. That immersion in the character causes you to be more immersed in the world that they live in, and this in turn causes there to be a connection that makes your character want to take the adventure hooks that are thrown out there to them. The better you know who your character is, the easier it is to play them. At least that's what I think about it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments, and feel free to share your tips with the group because, hey, I'm all about getting new people into the hobby here and giving them really good, easy tips to get them playing as fast as possible and really enjoying our hobby. So if you're a GM out there and you have some good tips on what players can do to know thyself better, then put it in the comments below and join in the conversation because I really love giving tips to the new folks. My people, that's all I got for you really today. I'll be coming at you with more in the future, so please stay tuned. I apologize if my upload schedule is a little bit weird, but I do this for fun and I make no money doing it, so I do it when I'm able to write, record, and edit. And despite how simple my little channel is here, all that still takes the almighty currency of time, and something I don't always have in large supply. Despite that, I still have plenty planned for the future, and we will see where we get with this. But hey, let me give a big shout out to my guy RPG Bliss. He's a subscriber who just started his own channel. I'll put a link for him in the description below. Thank you, sir, for your kind words, and I wish you the best on your journey, my dude. Go check him out, subscribe to his channel, and give him a fighting chance out there. Also, a huge shout out to the subscribers who have joined recently. When I recorded this, I just found out that I broke 400 subscribers, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. The fact that 400 people gave a darn for anything I said at any time is pretty amazing. So I can't thank you enough, and you really make a guy feel kind of humbled by this whole thing. So thank you very much. Remember that creating dynamic characters can be a blast for you and the rest of the table, especially if you, like me, want to play for fun first. Thanks for watching, everybody.